There's an unwritten rule in the Porcupine Mountains. Every ranger knows it. Every search and rescue volunteer learns it within their first season. Every local who spent any real time in those woods has figured it out on their own. Nobody talks about where the rule came from. Nobody admits that it even exists. If you ask directly, people will look at you funny and change the subject. But everyone follows it. And the rule is simple. If you're hiking the escarpment and you see a trail you don't recognize, a path that cuts away from the marked route and winds deeper into the old growth, you don't take it. You don't even look at it for too long. You keep your eyes forward. You stay on the marked path, and you pretend you never saw anything at all. I learned why the hard way, and now I'm telling you, because the thing I found out there is still hungry, still waiting, still calling to anyone stupid enough to think they know better than the rule. My name is Marcus. I'm 34 years old. I've been a volunteer with Ontonagon County Search and Rescue for 7 years. I've pulled hikers out of ravines. I've recovered bodies from frozen lakes. I've seen what happens when people underestimate the wilderness. I thought I'd seen everything. I thought I understood these woods, the dangers they held, the ways they could kill you if you weren't careful. But I was wrong, because the things I'd been trained to fear, hypothermia, dehydration, falls, animal attacks, those are natural dangers, things that make sense, things you can prepare for and prevent if you're smart enough and careful enough. What I found in October of 2024, that wasn't natural. That was something else entirely. The call came in on a Thursday afternoon, October 17th. I remember the date because it was exactly 1 year after my father died. I was thinking about him when dispatch called, thinking about how much he loved these woods, how many hunting seasons we'd spent together in exactly this kind of terrain. He would have told me not to take the job, would have told me to stay home, call in sick, let someone else handle it. He knew these woods too, knew the things that lived in them, knew the stories that the old-timers told around campfires when they thought the young people weren't listening. But he wasn't there to warn me. So I took the call. Dispatch relayed the details while I was still pulling on my boots. Missing hiker, female, 26 years old. Name was Jenna Kowalski. She'd set out alone on the Lake of the Clouds Overlook Trail around 8 that morning, planned to do a day hike to the escarpment and back. Should have been a 5-hour round trip at most. Her boyfriend reported her missing at 4 p.m. when she didn't respond to texts, and her car was still in the parking lot. I remember thinking, 8 hours overdue, in October, in the Porkies. That's not good. Temperature was already dropping. Low 40s during the day, mid-20s expected overnight, and the forecast showed rain moving in around midnight, which meant potential hypothermia conditions for anyone stuck out there without proper gear. We mobilized fast, 6 of us on the initial search team. I partnered with a guy named Doug Reinhardt, retired state trooper, built like a refrigerator, been doing SAR work longer than I'd been alive. He didn't talk much, but when he did, you listened. There's a moment before every search when you assess the situation, run through the possibilities. Best case, the hiker got turned around and is sitting by a creek waiting for help. Worst case? Well, we try not to think about worst case, but 8 hours overdue in October, in the Porkies, the numbers weren't good. Even experienced hikers got lost in those woods. The terrain was deceptive. Trails that looked straightforward on a map became mazes of switchbacks and false summits in person. Cell service was non-existent, and the weather could turn without warning. We had maybe 3 hours of useful daylight left. After that, we'd be searching by headlamp, which was slower and more dangerous for everyone involved. Doug handed me a map, marked our sector, didn't say anything about the odds, and he didn't need to. We started at the trailhead and worked our way up toward the escarpment. Standard protocol. Call her name every 100 yards. Check for any signs she'd left the marked path. Look for clothing, gear, footprints, anything that might tell us which direction she went. The first 2 hours were routine. We found nothing unusual. Just the trail winding through old-growth hemlock and sugar maple. The kind of forest that makes you feel small. Trees that were already ancient when the first Europeans stumbled into this country. Doug kept checking his compass. I noticed that. Every few minutes he'd pull it out, verify our heading, then put it away again. Problem? I asked him around 5:30 when the light was starting to fade. He didn't answer right away, just stood there, staring at the compass face. Magnetic anomaly, he finally said. Happens sometimes up here. Iron deposits in the bedrock makes the needle act funny. I looked at his compass. The needle was spinning slowly, not pointing anywhere in particular, just rotating. Does that mean we're off course? Means we need to pay attention to the trail markers, not the equipment. He put the compass away, started walking again. I followed, but something about the way he said it, the tone of his voice, made me think he wasn't telling me everything. We found the first sign of Jenna around 6:15, a granola bar wrapper caught in a low branch about 30 feet off the main trail, the kind of thing you'd only notice if you were looking for it. Doug crouched down, studied the ground. She went this way, he said, pointing deeper into the woods. See the broken fern, the scuffed moss on that rock? She left the trail here. I looked where he was pointing, and I saw it. A path, not a marked trail, not an official route maintained by the Park Service, just a gap between the trees that seemed to invite you forward. A natural corridor through the underbrush that looked easier to walk than the marked trail we'd been following. Why would she leave the trail? I asked. Doug stood up. His face was unreadable. Same reason anyone does. She saw something that looked like a shortcut. Didn't realize it wasn't. Wasn't what? He looked at me then. Really looked at me. And I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before in 7 years of working beside him. Fear. Wasn't a trail, he said. Come on, we're losing light. I grabbed his arm before he could move forward. Wait, Doug, what do you mean it wasn't a trail? Look at it. Someone clearly walked through here. Multiple times, probably. This is obviously... Marcus, his voice was sharp, harder than I'd ever heard it. Listen to me. I've been doing this for 32 years. I've searched these woods more times than I can count, and I'm telling you, that path wasn't there this morning. That's impossible. A lot of things out here are impossible. Doesn't mean they're not real. He pulled his arm free, started walking again, but not toward the trail, away from it, back toward the marked path we'd come from. Doug, the granola bar wrapper was over there. Jenna went that way. We can't just... We're not going that way. She's missing. It's getting dark. If she's hurt, she's already gone. The way he said it, final, certain, like he was pronouncing a verdict he'd passed 100 times before. What are you talking about? He stopped, turned to face me, and in the fading light, I could see how old he looked, how tired, like he'd been carrying something heavy for a very long time. I've seen that trail before, Marcus. Not here. Different spots, different years, but the same trail. It shows up when someone goes missing, offers an easier path, a shortcut, something that looks like help but isn't. That doesn't make any sense. I know. He ran a hand over his face. But the people who take that trail, they don't come back. Not the way they went in. Maybe not at all. So we just leave her? Give up? Tell dispatch we found evidence and walked away? We tell dispatch we searched until dark and found no sign of the missing hiker, which is the truth. We didn't find her. We found something else. I can't do that. You don't have a choice. He started walking again, back toward the main trail. I stood there for a long moment, looking at that gap between the trees, that impossible path that Doug said hadn't existed that morning. And then I did something stupid. I followed Jenna. We followed the path. I don't know what else to call it. There was clearly something there. Trampled vegetation, broken branches, the occasional footprint in soft soil. Someone had walked this route recently, probably Jenna. But the further we went, the more wrong it felt. The trees seemed to lean in. The canopy overhead grew thicker, blocking what little twilight remained. And the silence. God, the silence. No birds, no insects, no wind rustling through the leaves, just our footsteps, our breathing, and something else. A sound I couldn't quite identify. Low, rhythmic, almost like a pulse. No, not almost. Exactly like a pulse, like a heartbeat, but wrong somehow. Too slow, too deep. Like it was coming from something massive, something enormous, something that breathed on a completely different scale than anything that should exist in these woods. I tried to locate the source, turned my head, strained my ears, but the sound seemed to come from everywhere at once, from the trees, from the ground beneath my feet, from the darkening sky above, like the forest itself had a heartbeat, like we'd walked into something alive. "Doug," I whispered, "you hear that?" He didn't answer. I turned around. He wasn't there. I'm not ashamed to admit I panicked. 1 second, Doug was right behind me. The next, nothing. Just empty forest in every direction. I called his name, shouted it, screamed it until my throat was raw. No response. I pulled out my radio. Dead. Not even static. Just silence. I checked my phone. No signal, which wasn't unusual this deep in the Porkies, but the screen was acting strange, flickering, showing a time that didn't match my watch. According to my phone, it was 3:17 in the morning. According to my watch, it was 6:42 p.m. I chose to believe my watch. But here's the thing that still haunts me about that moment. When I looked around trying to get my bearings, I noticed the trees were different, not just unfamiliar, wrong. The bark had patterns on it that looked almost like faces if you stared long enough. Eyes and mouths stretched into silent screams. Shapes that seemed to shift when you weren't looking directly at them. And the smell, there was a smell now. Sweet and rotten at the same time. Like fruit that had fallen from the branch and started to decay. Like something had died nearby and been left to return to the earth. It coated the back of my throat, made my eyes water. I tried to backtrack, retrace my steps to the marked trail, find my way back to something familiar. But the path I'd followed in wasn't there anymore. I know how that sounds. Believe me. I've thought about it every day for the past year. Tried to rationalize it, tried to explain it with logic and science and everything I know about wilderness navigation. But there's no explanation. The path was gone. In its place was just forest. Dense, impenetrable, ancient forest. Like nothing had ever passed through there. Like no one had walked that route in centuries. And the pulse, that low rhythmic sound, it was getting louder, closer. I kept moving. Didn't know what else to do. Staying still felt worse than walking. At least when I was moving, I could pretend I was making progress, pretend I had some control over my situation. But the trees all looked the same. The ground all looked the same. And no matter which direction I walked, the sound followed me. That pulse, that heartbeat, that something that wasn't my imagination. I started noticing things, carvings on the trees, old ones, symbols I didn't recognize. They looked hand-carved, rough and primitive, but there was a pattern to them, a repetition, like someone had marked every 20th tree with the same sequence of lines and circles. And the deeper I went, the newer the carvings looked. The oldest ones were weathered almost smooth, barely visible. You had to run your fingers over the bark to feel them, but some of them still had sap weeping from the cuts. Fresh, recent. Someone else was out here, and whoever they were, they'd been doing this for a very long time. I started paying closer attention to the carvings, trying to find a pattern, trying to understand what they meant. The oldest ones were simple, just circles with lines through them, like a compass or a target, or something else I couldn't quite identify. But the newer ones were more complex, figures, shapes, things that might have been human once but had been stretched and twisted into something else, and scattered among them, words, carved deep into the bark, some in English, some in French, some in languages I didn't recognize. Stay on path, no return. Ait watches, hungry, and one, the newest one, carved so recently that sap was still running down the tree like blood from a wound. Jenna K., October 17, 2024. Her name, carved into the tree, dated for today. I found her around what I estimated was 9 p.m. My watch had stopped working by then, both hands frozen at 7:13, and my phone was showing images now, not the time, not the home screen, just images, pictures of trees, pictures of the forest, pictures that looked exactly like what I was seeing in front of me, except in the pictures, there was something standing between the trees, a figure, tall, too tall. Wrong proportions, limbs that bent at angles that made my stomach turn, and it seemed to be getting closer in each successive image, like time-lapse photography of something approaching. I stopped looking at my phone after that, shoved it in my pocket, tried to pretend I hadn't seen what I'd seen. But the images stayed with me, burned into my memory. That shape, that wrongness, that thing that was somehow both in my phone and in the forest at the same time. Jenna Kowalski was sitting at the base of an enormous white pine. Alive. That was my first thought. Thank God she's alive. She was breathing. Her eyes were open. She was looking right at me. But she wasn't moving. I approached slowly, announced myself, told her I was search and rescue, told her I was here to help. She didn't respond. I got within 10 feet of her and stopped. Something was wrong with her face. Not injured, not damaged, just empty. Like someone had taken a photograph of a human being and printed it on flesh. All the features were there, eyes, nose, mouth, but none of the animation, none of the life. Jenna? I said her name softly, carefully. Jenna, can you hear me? Her mouth moved, slowly, mechanically, like she'd forgotten how lips were supposed to work. It showed me. Her voice was wrong too, thin, distant, like she was speaking from very far away even though she was right in front of me. Showed you what? What it's hungry for. Her head tilted. That same wrong angle I'd seen on the deer in story 2. Like her neck was broken, but she was choosing to ignore it. It's been here so long. Longer than the trees, longer than the mountains. It was here before there were paths through these woods, before there were people to walk them. She blinked, slowly, like she was remembering how eyelids worked. And it's learned. Over the centuries, it's learned what draws people off the safe paths, what makes them take shortcuts, what makes them follow trails that aren't really there. Her empty eyes found mine again. Curiosity. That's what it's hungry for. The need to know. The need to explore. The thing that makes humans different from other animals. It feeds on that. Drains it out of you until there's nothing left but this. She gestured at herself, at her empty face, at her wrong posture, at everything that used to be Jenna Kowalski and was now something else entirely. I used to be curious, she said. I used to want to know things. Now I don't want anything. I just wait and watch and help it find more. I should have run. I know that now. I should have turned around and sprinted in any direction and not stopped until I collapsed from exhaustion. But I didn't, because I heard Doug's voice behind me. Marcus, don't move. I spun around, and there he was, standing about 20 yards away, his flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. Doug, thank God, what happened to you? Where did you... I said, don't move. Something in his voice stopped me cold. He wasn't looking at me. He was looking at something above me. I didn't want to look up. Every instinct I had was screaming at me not to look up, but I couldn't help it. My neck craned back almost against my will. My eyes lifted toward the canopy, and I saw it. I don't know how long I stood there. Time had stopped meaning anything. The cold had seeped into my bones so deep I couldn't feel my fingers, my toes, my face. Everything was numb except the terror. It hung in the canopy above me like a spider waiting at the center of its web. But it wasn't a spider. It wasn't anything I had a word for. Just shapes and shadows and angles that my brain refused to process. Like looking at an optical illusion that makes you sick to your stomach. Like trying to focus on something that exists just slightly out of phase with reality. I remember feeling cold. Colder than I'd ever been. like something was pulling the warmth out of my body through my skin, through my eyes, through my mouth every time I tried to breathe. I remember the pulse getting so loud, it wasn't sound anymore. It was vibration. It was pressure. It was inside my chest, making my heart skip beats, making my lungs forget how to expand. I remember understanding, in some primal, wordless way, that I was looking at something that had been in these woods for a very, very long time. Something that had been here before the trails, before the park, before the people who carved those symbols came through and tried to warn others away. Something that was hungry. Something that had been feeding on hikers and hunters and anyone foolish enough to follow paths that weren't meant to be followed. And I remember Jenna's voice, calm and flat and wrong. It's been waiting. It's been so patient. It only gets to eat when someone comes off the trail, when someone takes the path that isn't there. It called to me all morning, showed me a shortcut, showed me something that looked easier than where I was supposed to go. She paused. Her empty eyes finally moved. Found mine. It showed me you too, hours ago. It showed me you walking through the forest. It showed me what you looked like when you were afraid. It wanted to know what you tasted like. Doug saved my life. I don't know how. I don't remember most of the details. One moment I was frozen in place, staring up at something that shouldn't exist, feeling my consciousness start to fray at the edges like wet paper. And the next, I was running, crashing through underbrush, branches tearing at my face and arms, Doug's hand gripping my jacket, pulling me forward, keeping me moving when every instinct in my body wanted to stop and curl into a ball and wait for the end. He was screaming something, words I couldn't understand. Maybe they weren't words at all. Maybe it was just sound, human sound, drowning out that pulse that had gotten inside my head and was trying to hollow me out from the inside. We ran until my legs gave out, collapsed in a clearing I didn't recognize. Lay there gasping while the sunrise slowly painted the sky orange and pink and impossible blue. The first thing I remember thinking was, the sunrise. We made it to sunrise. We were back on the marked trail, less than a quarter mile from the parking lot. Neither of us could explain how we'd gotten there. Neither of us could account for the hours between seeing that thing and finding ourselves collapsed in the dawn light. It was like someone had taken scissors to my memory and cut out the middle part. But we were alive. That was the only thing that mattered. We were alive. Jenna Kowalski was never found. The official report lists her as a missing person, presumed dead from exposure. The search continued for 2 weeks before being called off due to weather conditions. I gave my statement. Told them I'd gotten separated from Doug in the dark. Told them I'd searched, but found no sign of the missing hiker. Told them the truth, just not all of it. Doug gave the same story. We've never talked about what really happened, never mentioned that night to each other or anyone else. It's like an unspoken agreement between us, a mutual understanding that some things are better left buried. But I think about it. Every day, I think about that path that wasn't there, about the symbols on the trees, about the pulse that got inside my chest and wouldn't let go. And I think about Jenna, sitting at the base of that white pine, eyes empty, voice wrong, telling me what it was hungry for. I still volunteer with search and rescue. Probably shouldn't. Probably should have quit that night and never gone back into those woods. But here's the thing. Last month we got a call about a missing hiker, male, 32 years old, set out alone on the escarpment trail, didn't come back. Standard search protocol, teams of 2. Check the marked path first. Look for signs of deviation. I found another wrapper, another break in the underbrush, another path that shouldn't have been there, and I saw footprints leading into it, fresh ones. So I walked past, kept my eyes forward, stayed on the marked trail, just like the rule says. But as I passed, I heard something. A voice calling for help from somewhere deep in the trees, and it sounded exactly like me. They found that hiker 2 days later, 3 miles off the marked trail. No explanation for how he got there, no memory of the past 48 hours. His name was Kevin Marsh, 32 years old, experienced hiker, had done this trail a dozen times before without incident. When they found him, he was sitting at the base of a tree, legs crossed, hands folded in his lap, like he was meditating or waiting for something. He was alive, physically unharmed, not even dehydrated despite being in the woods for 2 days without water. But something was wrong with his eyes. Empty, like someone had taken a photograph of a human being and printed it on flesh. And there was something else. When they moved him, when they tried to help him stand, his movements were wrong, jerky, mechanical, like he'd forgotten how human bodies were supposed to work, like he was a puppet trying to remember how to walk without strings. He's in a facility now. Hazlitt, the psychiatric hospital down in Lansing. Hasn't spoken since they brought him in, just sits there, stares at nothing. Sometimes his lips move. The nurses say he's trying to say something. The same thing, over and over, but no sound comes out. I visited him once, told them I was doing follow-up on the search. Routine stuff. They let me in. Kevin was sitting by the window, staring out at the grounds, his back to me. I said his name, no response. I walked around, got in front of him, looked at his face. His eyes tracked to me, slowly, like a camera panning across a scene, and then his lips started moving. I read his lips, and he was saying, "It's still hungry." I've been back to the Porcupine Mountains twice since that night. Not for search and rescue, not for anything official, just checking, making sure it's still contained, making sure the rule is still being followed. The first time was 6 months after my encounter. I parked at the same trailhead, walked the same path, looked for any sign of the gap in the trees that had swallowed me that October night. I didn't find it, but I found something else. Carved into a hemlock about a mile from where Doug and I had spotted Jenna's granola bar wrapper. Fresh cuts, sap still weeping from the marks. The same symbols I'd seen that night, the same circles and lines, the same warning. And underneath them, carved in English, 2 words. Stay out. I don't know who carved them. Don't know if it was a person trying to warn others or something else marking its territory. But I took a picture, sent it to Doug. He called me that night. First time we'd spoken in months. Don't go back, he said. Don't ever go back. I have to know what it is. I have to understand. You won't understand. Nobody understands. The people who figured out those symbols, the ones who came through these woods before any of us, they didn't understand either. They just learned to stay away. He hung up. That was the last time I talked to Doug Reinhardt. He retired from SAR 2 weeks later, moved to Arizona, desert country, as far from old-growth forest as you can get. I don't blame him. The second time I went back was last month. Different reason. I'd heard about a new search, 2 hikers, young couple from Minneapolis. They'd set out on the Lake of the Clouds trail and never returned. Sound familiar? I went to the trailhead, not to join the search. I'm not cleared for that anymore after what happened. Just to watch. To see if anyone else noticed what I'd noticed. If anyone else felt what I'd felt. They found the couple on day 3, both alive, both conscious, both unable to explain where they'd been for 48 hours. But here's the thing. When they brought them out, when I saw their faces from across the parking lot, their eyes were wrong. Not empty like that other hiker. Not blank. Something else. Something that looked out at me. Looked through me. Something that recognized what I'd seen. What I knew. What I carried with me from that October night. They smiled, both of them. At the exact same time. The same smile. The same expression. Like puppets being controlled by the same hand. And then they got in an ambulance and drove away. I check the news for them sometimes. Try to find out what happened. Where they went. Whether they ever got better. But there's nothing. It's like they never existed at all. Like the universe closed over where they'd been and smoothed out the wrinkles. Like reality had swallowed them whole. That's what it does. Takes people, erases them, makes it so no one remembers they were ever here. I check for them, look them up, try to find any record of their existence. Nothing. No social media, no news stories, no missing persons reports. No grieving families wondering where they went, like they were never born. That's the part that scares me most. Not what it does to your body, not what it turns you into, but what it does to your existence, to your memory, to every trace you ever left on the world. Once it takes you, you're not just dead. You're erased, and that's worse than dying. That's worse than anything. If you're ever hiking in the Porcupine Mountains, if you're ever on the escarpment trail and you see a path you don't recognize, don't take it, don't look at it, and don't even think about it. Just keep walking. Keep your eyes on the marked trail. Keep putting one foot in front of the other until you're back at the trailhead, back in your car, back somewhere with cell service and other people and all the things that make the modern world feel safe. And if you hear a voice calling your name from somewhere off the trail, don't answer. Even if it sounds like someone you know, even if it sounds like someone in trouble, even if every instinct you have is screaming at you to help. Don't answer. Because some shortcuts don't save time. Some shortcuts cost you everything. And once you start down that path, you might not find your way back. The first time I saw it, I convinced myself I was tired. 36 hours into a 72-hour shift, checking bait stations along the border of the Ottawa National Forest, fighting to stay awake behind the wheel of my truck while the November darkness pressed against the windows like something alive. I told myself it was fatigue, sleep deprivation, my brain playing tricks because I'd been running on coffee and adrenaline since Wednesday. But deep down, in that part of your mind that remembers what it was like to be prey, I knew better. I knew what I'd seen wasn't natural, and I knew it had seen me too. My name is Colleen Martindale. I'm 41 years old. I've been a conservation officer with the Michigan DNR for 16 years. Before that, I spent 4 years with the Forest Service in Montana and 2 in Alaska's Kenai Peninsula. I've tracked wolves across frozen tundra. I've processed poaching scenes that would make a homicide detective vomit. I've spent more nights alone in the wilderness than most people spend in their own homes. I've been charged by grizzlies, stalked by mountain lions, had a bull moose try to flip my kayak in the middle of a lake 10 miles from the nearest road. I've faced down armed poachers, confronted meth cooks in their camouflaged forest labs, been shot at twice, stabbed once, and threatened with everything from lawsuits to lynching. I know wildlife. I know danger. I know what's normal, what's natural, what belongs in the northern woods. And what I saw on County Road 711, what I've been seeing ever since, doesn't belong anywhere. Let me start at the beginning. November of 2024, peak of firearm deer season, the busiest 2 weeks of my year. Every year it's the same. The forests fill with hunters from downstate, from Wisconsin, from Ohio, from everywhere else. Most of them know what they're doing. They've been hunting these woods for years. They follow the rules. They respect the land. But some of them don't. Some of them think the rules don't apply to them. Think they can bait. Think they can hunt at night. Think they can take does out of season or exceed their bag limit or shoot from moving vehicles or any of the 100 other violations I deal with every November. That's my job. Finding them, documenting their violations, making sure the resource is protected for everyone. My territory covers about 600 square miles of the western Upper Peninsula, mostly Ottawa National Forest, but also some private land and tribal territory. 600 square miles of forest and swamp and lake and river. 600 square miles that I know better than my own apartment. During deer season, I'm responsible for checking hunters, processing harvest reports, investigating complaints, and responding to any incidents involving wildlife. It's exhausting work, long hours, bad weather, dealing with people who don't appreciate being checked for violations. Some of them get angry, some of them get threatening, some of them make me wish I'd followed my mother's advice and gone into nursing instead. But I've always loved it. There's something pure about being in the woods, about being the person who stands between the wildlife and the people who would exploit it. Loved it, past tense, because after what happened that November, I'm not sure I'll ever feel the same way about these woods again. It's exhausting work. Long hours, bad weather, dealing with people who don't appreciate being checked for violations, people who think a badge and a uniform make me their enemy instead of someone trying to help. But I love it. Loved it. Past tense. Because after what happened that November, I'm not sure I'll ever feel the same way about these woods again. The night of November 14th, I was running bait station checks along the forest boundary. Baiting is illegal during deer season, has been for years. But every year, some idiots think they can get away with it. Dump corn or sugar beets in the middle of the forest and hope nobody notices. My job is to notice. I'd been at it since 6 a.m. that morning, driven over 200 miles of back roads, documented 3 violations, written 2 citations, had one guy threaten to sue me because I photographed his illegal mineral lick. By 10 p.m., I was done. Not finished with my route, just done. Mentally and physically exhausted. Ready to call it a night and pick up where I left off tomorrow. I was on CR 711, heading back toward Watersmeet, when I saw the deer. It was standing in the middle of the road. Not unusual. Deer in headlights. Literally. Happens all the time, especially during the rut when the bucks are chasing does and not paying attention to traffic. But this deer wasn't frozen in fear. It was standing there deliberately, waiting. I slowed down, hit my spotlight, lit up the road in front of me. The light cut through the darkness like a blade, illuminated about 100 feet of gravel road, trees pressing in on either side, the darkness beyond them absolute and impenetrable. And there, dead center in my lane. And that's when I noticed something was wrong. The deer was standing on its back legs, not rearing up the way deer sometimes do when they're startled, not on its hind legs temporarily while reaching for something overhead, not anything that could be explained by normal deer behavior. Standing, balanced, stable, like a person, like it had always stood that way, like standing on 4 legs was the unnatural thing, like this was how it was supposed to be. A figure, tall, too tall, wrong proportions, limbs that bent at angles that made my stomach turn, and its front legs were hanging at its sides, limp, relaxed, the way your arms would hang if you were just standing around waiting for something. Or someone. Its head was tilted at an angle that no deer should be able to achieve, almost perpendicular to its body, like it had a broken neck, but was choosing to ignore that fact. Like the rules that govern living things didn't apply to it anymore. And there was a smell, even inside my truck with the windows up. I could smell it, coming through the vents, seeping through the seals around the doors, sweet and rotten at the same time, like old meat, like something that had died a long time ago but was still somehow walking around. I sat there for probably 30 seconds, couldn't move, couldn't think. Just stared at this deer that was standing like a human being in the middle of a forest road at 10 o'clock at night. Then it turned its head. Not the way deer turn their heads, quick, jerky, ears rotating to track sounds from different directions, slow, smooth, deliberate, like it was looking at me, like it wanted me to know it was looking at me. And I saw its eyes. They weren't deer eyes. Deer eyes reflect light. You hit them with a spotlight, they glow green or gold or orange depending on the angle. That's how you spot them at night, that reflective shine. It's called eye shine, and it's caused by a layer of tissue behind the retina that bounces light back through the eye to improve night vision. Every animal I've ever seen has eye shine. Every mammal, every bird, even some fish. These eyes didn't reflect anything. They absorbed the light, drank it in. 2 black holes where eyes should have been, like looking into the void, like looking at nothing at all. Number worse than nothing, looking at something that was actively consuming, pulling in light and warmth and everything else around it, a hunger-given form, an absence that wanted to grow. And even though I couldn't see any expression, even though there was no way to read emotion in that wrongly positioned face, I knew it was smiling. I don't remember driving away. One moment I was sitting there, frozen, staring at something that couldn't exist. The next, I was 3 miles down the road, going 60 on a gravel surface, my hands shaking so badly I could barely keep the truck between the ditches. I pulled over, killed the engine, sat in the silence and tried to convince myself I had imagined it. Fatigue, stress, the darkness playing tricks. But my body knew better. My heart was pounding. My mouth was dry. Every instinct I had was screaming that I'd just encountered a predator, something dangerous, something that wanted to hurt me. And I've spent my entire career learning to trust those instincts. I reported it the next morning, not officially. You can't file an incident report about a deer standing like a human being. They'd send you for a psych evaluation and put you on desk duty until you passed. But I mentioned it to a few other officers, casually, like it was a funny story. You won't believe what I thought I saw last night. Most of them laughed it off, but one of them didn't. A guy named Pete Delacroix, 53 years old, been with the DNR longer than anyone I know, worked every corner of the UP over a career spanning 3 decades. He pulled me aside after the morning briefing, looked me dead in the eyes. "Where?" he asked. "CR 711, about 4 miles south of the Sylvania entrance." He nodded slowly, like I'd confirmed something he already suspected. "The old growth section, near the hemlock stand." "Yeah, how did you see its eyes?" I felt the blood drain from my face. "How did you know about the eyes?" He didn't answer. Just stood there for a long moment, his jaw working like he was chewing on words he didn't want to say. Then, "It found a new spot. Hasn't been that far east in years." "What are you talking about? What is it?" He looked around, made sure no one was within earshot, pulled me toward the coffee station in the corner where we'd have some privacy. 1983, he said quietly. "That's when I first saw it. I was fresh out of academy, 22 years old, thought I knew everything about the woods." He poured himself a coffee. His hands were trembling slightly. "I was checking a deer camp near the Sturgeon River Gorge. Routine stuff, making sure everyone had proper licenses. Got out of my truck around dusk, started walking toward the camp." He took a sip, stared at nothing. "That's when I heard it. Something moving through the brush, too heavy to be a deer, too quiet to be a bear." I called out, identified myself. No response. "What did you do?" "I followed it. Stupid, right? 22 years old and invincible. I followed the sound into the trees." He set down his coffee. "Found it standing in a clearing about 50 yards in. At first I thought it was a person, someone in a costume, some kind of sick joke, because it was standing like a person, on 2 legs, arms at its sides. But it wasn't a person. It was a deer, a whitetail buck, 12 points at least, standing upright in the middle of the forest, and it was looking at me." His voice dropped even lower. "Its eyes. They weren't deer eyes, they were human eyes, blue, pale blue, the color of someone I knew, someone who'd gone missing from that same area 3 years earlier." Jesus! I ran, didn't stop running until I hit the main road, flagged down a passing car, made up some story about a wildlife encounter, never told anyone the truth. Until now. Until now. He met my eyes. "I don't know what it is. Nobody does. But it's been in these woods for longer than the DNR, longer than the logging companies, longer than the Ojibwe, probably. They have stories about it, warnings, things you're supposed to do if you see it." "What kind of things?" "Don't look at it, don't acknowledge it, and for God's sake, don't let it know you're afraid." He paused, looked out the window at the forest beyond. "And if you see it again, if it comes back, don't try to fight it. Don't try to understand it. Just run. Get out of the area. Don't stop until you're around other people." "Pete, you're scaring the hell out of me." "Good, that means you're paying attention." He started to walk away, then stopped, turned back. "One more thing. The thing out there, it's not alone. Used to be, but not anymore. The ones it takes, they don't just disappear. They become something else, something that hunts for it, something that helps it feed." "What do you mean?" "You'll see," he said. "God help you, but you'll see." I wish I'd listened to him, and I wish I'd taken his warning seriously instead of dismissing it as old-timer superstition. But I didn't, because 3 nights later, it came back. November 17th, I was checking a hunting camp on private land about 8 miles from where I'd seen the deer. Anonymous complaint about shots fired after legal hours. Possible night hunting violation. The camp was empty when I arrived. Whoever had been there was gone. I documented what I could. Fresh shell casings, a gut pile that suggested recent harvest, tire tracks leading back to the main road. Standard stuff. I was walking back to my truck when I heard it. My flashlight beam swept across the clearing one last time. Everything looked normal. Just an empty hunting camp in the November dark. Tarps over firewood, coolers stacked near the fire pit. A trail camera strapped to an oak tree about 30 yards out. Trail camera. I made a mental note to check it. Sometimes poachers don't realize those things are there. Sometimes you can catch them in the act without ever having to be present for the crime. But first, I wanted to get back to my truck. Something about this place felt wrong. Not dangerous exactly, just off. Like the air was too still. Like the darkness was watching. I was halfway across the clearing when I heard it. Footsteps. Behind me, close. I spun around, hit my flashlight. Nothing. Just trees. Just darkness. Just the November wind rattling bare branches overhead. But the footsteps didn't stop. They kept coming. Slow and deliberate, crunching through dead leaves, getting closer. Except the sound was wrong. Too many impacts. Like someone walking on 4 legs instead of 2. But the rhythm was off, syncopated. Like whatever was walking had forgotten how many legs it was supposed to have. I drew my sidearm, not something I do lightly. 16 years on the job and I've only pulled my weapon a handful of times, but every instinct I had was telling me I was in danger. That primal, prehistoric part of my brain, the part that remembers what it was like when humans weren't at the top of the food chain, was screaming at me to run. But you can't run from something you can't see. DNR! Identify yourself! The footsteps stopped. Silence. Complete and total silence. Not even wind. Not even my own breathing, which had gotten so shallow I wasn't sure I was breathing at all. Then, laughter. Not human laughter. Not animal. Something in between. A wet, gurgling sound that rose and fell like breathing. And a voice. Colleen. My name. Whatever was out there. It knew my name. Colleen Martindale. Pronounced carefully, slowly, like it was practicing how to form the syllables. I watched you. 3 nights ago, on the road. You saw me, you saw me. The voice was getting closer. But I couldn't see anything moving. Couldn't pinpoint where the sound was coming from. You weren't supposed to see me. They never see me. They just feel me. Feel hungry, feel tired, feel ready to lie down and not get up again. I ran, left my truck, left my gear. Just ran into the darkness in a direction I hoped was toward the main road. I didn't think, didn't plan, just moved. Pure animal instinct taking over where rational thought had shut down completely. Behind me, the footsteps started again. Faster now, that wrong rhythm speeding up, getting louder, getting closer, and the voice kept talking. So hungry, so patient. I've been eating these woods for so long. Little bits, little pieces. The ones who wander, the ones who get lost, the ones nobody looks for. I crashed through underbrush. Thorns tore at my uniform. Branches whipped across my face. I could taste blood in my mouth, but I didn't stop. Couldn't stop. The darkness was absolute. My flashlight was gone, left behind at the hunting camp along with everything else. I was running blind, trusting my feet to find solid ground, trusting the trees to part before I slammed into them. But you're different. You'll look for them. You'll notice when they're gone. You'll make it harder for me to feed. I could feel it behind me, feel the cold of it, the wrongness of it, like reality itself was bending around whatever was chasing me, like the very air was trying to get out of its way. So I'll have to take you first. before you can tell anyone, before you can warn them, before you can spoil everything I've built here. Something grabbed my ankle. I went down hard, face first into the frozen ground, felt my flashlight go flying, heard my sidearm discharge once, twice, 3 times as my finger spasmed against the trigger. Then, nothing. Silence. I lay there in the dark, afraid to move, afraid to breathe. Something leaned close. I could feel its breath on my neck, cold, wrong, smelling like rot and copper and something else I couldn't identify. "You saw me," it whispered, "so now I'll show you everything." And then it did. I don't remember the next 4 hours, not consciously. My brain has locked those memories away somewhere I can't reach them, somewhere I probably don't want to reach them, but my body remembers. My body remembers running until my muscles tore, fighting until my knuckles split, screaming until my voice gave out, and my dreams remember. Every night since, I dream of what it showed me. The ones who came before, the ones who made the mistake of seeing, the ones who became part of it. Hundreds of them, maybe thousands, stretching back through centuries of this land being hunted by something that was never supposed to be here. I see their faces, I know their names, not because anyone told me, not because I researched them, but because that thing, when it showed me everything, every victim, every transformation, every moment of terror and confusion as they realized what was happening to them. A fur trapper from the 1700s who followed strange tracks into a swamp and never came out. A logging camp worker who heard voices in the night and went to investigate. A family on a camping trip in 1963 whose car was found abandoned on a forest road with all their belongings still inside. So many of them, and they're all still here, still walking these woods in shapes that don't make sense, still hunting for the thing that made them, still feeding its endless hunger, something that came through when the walls between worlds were thin, something that got stuck, something that learned to survive by taking and taking and taking. And now I know. Now I understand. The deer standing in the road. That wasn't really a deer. That was someone. Someone who saw. Someone who was taken. Someone who became a new shape for the thing that hunts these woods. The search team found me at dawn, unconscious, hypothermic, curled up at the base of a tree about 2 miles from the hunting camp. My weapon was still in my hand, all 15 rounds spent. The casings scattered around me in a perfect circle, not random, deliberate, like I'd been trying to create some kind of barrier. There was blood under my fingernails, not my own. But when they tested it, they couldn't identify it, couldn't match it to any known species. The lab report came back with a note that said, "Sample contaminated," and recommended resubmission. There was no sample to resubmit. They'd used it all. I spent 3 days in the hospital. They said it was exposure, exhaustion, possible seizure. They ran tests and found nothing wrong, physically, but mentally. The psychiatrist they brought in asked me a lot of questions. What I remembered, what I'd seen, what I thought had happened. I told her I got lost, got cold, had a panic attack, fired my weapon at something in the dark. "What did you think you were shooting at?" she asked. I looked her in the eyes. "A deer." She wrote something in her notes, nodded, told me that was a normal stress response, that people in survival situations often misidentify threats, that I shouldn't be too hard on myself. She had no idea, but I knew. I knew something had happened in those missing hours, something I couldn't remember but my body hadn't forgotten. Because I could still feel it, that cold, that wrongness, that presence at the edge of my awareness, and I could still hear its voice, whispering, showing me things. I see them now, the ones who didn't make it. They're everywhere in these woods. Hunters who wandered too far, hikers who took wrong turns, travelers whose cars broke down on empty roads, campers who heard something in the night and went to investigate instead of staying in their tents. So many of them, walking through the trees in shapes that don't make sense. Deer that stand like people, bears that move like spiders, wolves with too many legs, birds that don't fly but drag themselves along the ground, watching with eyes that remember being human. They don't look like the missing persons posters. They don't look human at all. Not anymore. They look like what happens when something takes you apart and puts you back together wrong. When something wears you like a costume and forgets how the pieces are supposed to fit. And they're hungry. God, they're so hungry. I've tried to warn people, tried to tell them not to hike alone in the Ottawa National Forest, not to hunt in the deep woods after dark, not to stop on the back roads no matter what they see standing in their headlights. I've talked to other officers, brought it up casually, asked if they've ever seen anything unusual, anything they couldn't explain. Most of them laugh it off, change the subject, look at me like I'm losing my mind. But a few of them don't. A few of them get very quiet, very still. And then they find an excuse to leave the conversation as quickly as possible. They know, they've seen, they just don't want to talk about it, and I understand that. I do, because talking about it makes it real. Admitting it exists means admitting that everything you thought you knew about the world is wrong. But nobody believes me when I try to warn them. They think I'm traumatized, that I had some kind of break, that the stress of the job finally caught up with me. Maybe they're right. Maybe I'm crazy. But last week, a hunter went missing near the Sylvania Wilderness, 63 years old, experienced woodsman, left his camp to track a blood trail and never came back. They searched for 4 days, found nothing, and on the 5th day, I saw something on CR 711, a deer, standing in the middle of the road, on its back legs, watching me with empty black eyes. And this time, I swear, it was wearing human clothes. So I'm not going back. I submitted my resignation last Tuesday. 30 days notice. After 16 years with the DNR, I'm walking away. My supervisor tried to talk me out of it, told me I was too valuable, told me the department needed officers like me, told me whatever happened out there, we could work through it together. I smiled and nodded and said all the right things, but I couldn't tell her the truth. Couldn't tell her that I see things now, things that shouldn't be there, things that watch from the edges of my vision and disappear when I turn to look. Couldn't tell her that the deer on the side of the road, the ones I used to drive past without a second thought, they all stand differently now. All watch me a little too long. All have that wrongness in the way they hold themselves. Couldn't tell her that I've stopped sleeping, that when I close my eyes, I see what it showed me. The hundreds of faces, the thousands of years, the endless hunger that can never be satisfied. I can't protect people from something I can't explain, can't file reports about creatures that shouldn't exist, can't pretend everything is normal when I know what's really out there in those woods. So I'm leaving, going somewhere flat, somewhere with no forests, somewhere the trees can't hide things. I'm thinking Kansas, Oklahoma, somewhere the horizon goes on forever and you can see anything coming from miles away. Not that it'll help. Not really. Because once you've seen it, once you know it exists, you're never really safe again. But I'm writing this down, leaving a record, because maybe someday, someone will take it seriously. Someone will listen. Someone will figure out what that thing is and how to stop it. Maybe someone will connect the dots. The missing persons cases in the Ottawa National Forest, the hikers who disappeared without a trace, the hunters whose camps were found abandoned with coffee still warm in the pot, the families who drove into these woods and were never seen again. There's a pattern. I can see it now. I've spent the past 3 months researching, going through old records, newspaper archives, missing persons databases. And the pattern is clear. Every few years, sometimes more often, sometimes less, people disappear in these woods, usually alone, usually in remote areas, usually in circumstances that don't quite add up, and nobody connects them. Because the forest is big, because accidents happen, because people get lost and die of exposure, and that's just the way it is. But they're not accidents. They're not random. They're feeding. Until then, if you're planning to visit the Western Upper Peninsula, if you're thinking about hunting or hiking or camping in the Ottawa National Forest, be careful. Stay on marked trails. Don't deviate. Don't take shortcuts. Don't follow paths that look easier than the route you planned. Don't go alone, ever. Bring a friend. Bring two friends. Bring someone who will notice if you don't come back. Someone who will call for help. Someone who will make sure the search starts before it's too late. Tell someone exactly where you're going and when you'll be back. Be specific. Give them your trailhead, your planned route, your expected return time. Check in regularly if you have service. If you miss a check-in, tell them to assume the worst. Carry an emergency beacon, a satellite communicator, something that works when there's no cell service, when you're miles from the nearest road, when you're in places where screaming won't do any good. And if you ever see a deer standing in the middle of the road, watching you, waiting, don't look at it. Don't acknowledge it. And whatever you do, don't let it know you're afraid. Because fear is a scent. Fear is a beacon. Fear is what calls them out of the dark spaces where they hide. And once they smell it on you, once they know you're prey, they never stop hunting. One last thing. Last week I got a letter. No return address, no postmark. Just my name typed on the envelope. Inside was a photograph, me in my uniform, standing next to my truck on CR 711, the same road where I first saw the deer. I don't remember that photograph being taken. Don't remember anyone else being there that night. But there I am, clear as day, looking at something off camera with an expression of pure terror on my face. And in the background, between the trees, barely visible in the darkness, dozens of shapes, standing wrong, watching, waiting, the ones it's made, the ones it's still making, the ones that used to be people like me. I burned the photograph. Didn't help, because now I know they can reach me anywhere. Now I know they're not just in the Ottawa National Forest. They're everywhere I've ever been, everyone I've ever known, everything I've ever touched. The thing I encountered that night, it wasn't confined to those woods. It was just based there, using that territory as its hunting ground, its feeding area, its home. But it can go anywhere it wants, and it marked me, left something on me, in me, something I can feel when I close my eyes, something that pulses in time with that heartbeat I heard in the forest. It saw me, and now it's never going to let me go.